In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act of 1975, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided. If any member has reason to believe this meeting is being held in violation of this act, they should state so at this time. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mrs. Werner?
Here.
Mr. Venuto?
Here.
Mr. Ledwin?
Here.
Mrs. Notch?
Here.
Ms. Sheehan? Mr. Walsh?
Here.
Mr. Zexer?
Here.
Mr. Bodnar?
Here.
Ms. Stevenson?
Here.
Thank you.
We have the minutes of the September 26, 2024 meeting. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion. Second.
Motion by Mr. Zetzer, seconded by
That was
Motion by
Mr.
Mr.
Bod-
Menudo, second.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Venuto.
Okay, I'm sorry, did Mr. Venuto motion or second?
Yes.
Second.
Okay, and then Mr. Zexer seconded?
And I second.
Okay, thank you.
Dan here.
Mr. Ledwin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Abstain.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Bodnar?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Our first resolution is Timothy Little, 925 Benton Avenue. Could we have that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Bodnar,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Venuto.
Mr. Ledwin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Abstain.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Bodnar?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Our next resolution is Michael Wood, 413 Broadway. Can we have that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Zetzer.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Notch.
Mr. Ledwin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Abstain.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Bodnar?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, our third resolution is Oceanfront Properties LLC, 1045 Beach Avenue. Have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Ledwin, seconded by Mr. Zetzer.
Mr. Ledwin? Mrs. Notch?
Abstain.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Bodnar?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, our first application tonight is Franklin Perth LLC, 22 Stockton Place. When you get seated, could you please all turn on your microphones?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kate Monzo from the law firm Monzo, Catanese Delalis. I am here tonight on behalf of Franklin Perth LLC. The property is 22 Stockton Place. Tonight I have a member of Franklin Perth LLC, Andrew Eisenstein, and we also have John Halberner, who is going to testify as our expert engineer tonight. This subject property is currently developed with a two-story multifamily dwelling, which is a permitted use in the RS zone where the property is located. The applicant is seeking approval for the reconstruction of the existing front porch and the existing footprint and replacement of the fabric awning with a fixed permanent roof. There was a package of renderings that was submitted with the applications. If you flip to the second page, you'll see a photo in the top left corner of the existing fabric awning and porch. And if you turn to page 5, you'll see a rendering of the proposed reconstructed front porch with the fixed permanent. For this application, variance relief is requested for the front yard setback of 10.93 feet, where 20 feet is required, and a side yard setback of 5.69 feet, where 10 feet is required. Both of these conditions are currently the same as what is existing on the property. Variance relief is also requested for existing non-conforming conditions, which include lot size per unit, lot width, and lot frontage, as well as minimum parking. These conditions are proposed to remain exactly the same as they previously were. And finally, one thing, this property is located in the Historic District. HPC approval was previously obtained in 2022 for the same design. However, at the time that the applicant did apply to the HPC, they were not aware that they needed a variance. However, these HPC approvals has since expired, so they are going to have to go back to the HPC with this same design for final approval.
One moment, please. Can you just bring the microphone a little closer? I'm having a hard time. Thank you very much.
Awesome. So I would like to swear in John Halberner as our expert.
Sure, I'll swear in your client as well at the same time, and also the board engineer. Do each of you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
John, I know you've been before this board, Mr. Halberner,
Yes.
many times before. Does the board accept him as an expert?
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
As an engineer and architect, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, so as Ms. Monzo mentioned in her opening statements, we're dealing with a existing building. It was originally built circa 1940. It's a 3-unit, essentially a triplex, with many nonconformities in terms of today's zoning requirements, but none of which are being increased in any way by the application. The development that we're here for this evening is about as simple as you can get. We have a front porch with a fabric awning with a metal frame. We're looking to remove the metal frame, fabric awning, and construct a hip roof that's a permanent roof. The nonconformities that exist for the existing porch, being the side yard setback and front yard setback, are going to be matched by the roof. So there is a technical exasperation of those nonconforming conditions by the addition of a new element, that element being the roof, but the magnitude itself does not change in any way. Get a couple facts on the record. The lot size itself it's a regular shaped, but about 53 feet wide and 88 feet deep, totaling 4,712 square feet. The only building on it is, in fact, the 2-story triplex, and it is largely, as I mentioned, non-conforming with regards to many of the bulk requirements. So we're here this evening to try and have those existing non-conforming conditions memorialized. For example, the lot size, where 12,500 square feet would be required for multifamily, we only have 4,712. And I ought to mention that, like many of the zones in Cape May, this particular one has a differing bulk requirements based upon the use. The use that we're characterizing this is all multifamily, which has that 12,500 square foot requirement. Similarly, there's a minimum lot size per dwelling unit of 2,500 square feet, where we have 1,571 square feet per unit. So it's a non-conforming condition with regards to that requirement. The building setback line, or as I like to call it, the front yard setback line, where 20 feet is required, 10.93 feet exist. Remember, that's the same, we're looking to maintain that same setback. Interestingly enough, remembering differing zone requirements for different uses, a single-family home in this zone requires 10 feet. So that front yard setback, or that building line setback, if it were a single, which we're not, would actually be compliant. It's important as well to talk about how we're consistent with the streetscape in a few minutes. We have a minimum 100-foot lot width requirement for multifamily where 52.31 feet exist. And we have a minimal habitable floor area per unit of 500 square feet. We have 3 units. 2 of those comply. 1 is 5 square feet deficient at 495 square feet. The side yard setback where 10 feet is required. On the north side, we have existing non-conforming conditions to steps of 2.96 feet. And on the south side, 2.7 feet to the rear steps. Those will remain totally unchanged by this application. Notably, on the south side porch, where the 10 foot is required, we have 5.69 feet. And again, that's the condition that we're going to be I'll use in quotes, exasperating by constructing the roof above it. Much like my conversation on the front yard setback, if this were a single-family home, it would be subject to a 5-foot side yard setback. It would in fact be compliant. We're not, we need 10 feet, but again, in terms of the character of the neighborhood, I'll describe shortly, that's important to note. Two other non-conforming conditions that are noteworthy, lot coverage where 70% is the maximum permitted, we're presently at 80%, and where 6 parking spaces be required, we're providing 5. So those are all non-conforming conditions. None are being increased in their magnitude. 2, the front yard setback and the side yard setback to the porch are being technically extended or aggravated by the construction of a new roof over top of porch within the same footprint of the existing porch. For context, surrounding properties are also in the RS zone, and as the zone would intend, it's predominantly residential all around us. As we get closer to Beach Avenue, we do start to transition into the commercial zone, but that's a little closer to Beach Avenue. I'd like to introduce the exhibit, I guess call it A1, which is aerial photograph of a couple photographs.
Can you make sure to bring the microphone with you as you describe the exhibit? And are you passing out the exhibit or just going to leave me one?
No, I did not bring handouts. It's a pretty simple exhibit. You cannot hear this?
Can you just repeat that? Go ahead.
I do not have handouts, no.
I'm sorry, I still don't have it.
In answer to your question of do I have handouts, the answer is no.
Okay, can you leave one set with me?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep,
Thank you
absolutely.
very much.
Okay, the background of this exhibit of A1, we have an aerial photograph. You'll see a dashed line. That dashed line is equal to our front porch, which is the property I'm pointing to here. So you can see that the general alignment of the front yards for buildings up and down Stockton Place is right along this front line. So while we're seeking that front yard setback variance, we are in fact very consistent with what happens up and down the entire side of Stockton Place. Something else I think is notable in the upper left-hand corner is a screenshot of the existing building. You can see the fabric awning structure and the rendering that's included in the interset of the proposed condition. Two notable things with this. First of all, I think this is a significant aesthetic enhancement. Second of all, by appearance, to anyone from the street, that building, to me at least, appears to be a single-family home. So in the context of we're seeking a front yard setback variance and side yard setback variance because we're multifamily, if this were a single, that would be fully conforming. And to the general public, it sort of looks like more like a single. So it's a sort of mitigating factor in terms of us requiring this variance relief. I think there are several benefits that the granting of this relief offers to the community. First of all, again, I think the facade improvements are noticeable, and I think it contributes better to the historic district. That's evidenced by the original HPC approval that was granted. They likewise agreed. And one of the bulk requirements I did not address because it is in fact conforming, where we would be allowed to have a 40-foot tall building, we're at less than 19 feet. So if you look at the trade-off of asking for a front yard setback variance for a small porch roof, that has far less implications to the streetscape than a conforming building at some 40 feet tall. So the benefit is, by granting this relief, first of all, this board always has the condition that no other improvements in this property can take place without returning to this board. And with this, you'll have the control. The comparison of a 40-foot tall building versus granting of relief for this front porch, I think, is a very good trade-off that benefits the community. With those benefits, I think there are a couple purposes of the municipal land use law that are being advanced by the granting of this relief. First of all, to encourage municipal action to promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. We're doing that by promoting the streetscape and the historic district. Second of all, to promote a desirable visual environment. Clearly, again, the streetscape is enhanced by the granting of this relief. So I think those are all positive. They're purposes of municipal land use law that are being advanced, which touches both or more on the C2 criteria for the variance relief. And for that, I'm speaking specifically with regard to the requested relief of the front and side yard setback. I might as well finish that thought before I jump over to the existing nonconforming conditions and start talking about the negative criteria. The relief we're seeking, front yard and side yard setback. Typically, those controls are put in place by boards and municipalities in order to maintain light, air, and open space, control streetscapes, and the appearance of mass to the public. In this instance, remember, the building appears to be a single-family home to anyone who's on the street. You'd have to go inside the building to realize that it's not. It would be fully conforming. So in terms of having a significant adverse impact on the intent of the zone, no, this looks like a single-family home and would comply as a single-family zone. So there cannot be a negative, let alone a substantial negative impact by that condition. So for those reasons, I believe both the positive and negative criteria have been satisfied for the granting of the front yard and side yard setback variances. Now, I went through quite a list of non-conforming conditions that are not touched in any way by this application. Those, I think, all fall squarely under the C1 criteria, where there is a hardship that exists upon the applicant. Those conditions exist, they can't change, they predate the ordinances, and there's nothing that they can do to change that. It's a legally existing building. So I think the granting of those existing non-conforming conditions by way of memorializing them as that, and if necessary, the variance be granted for them, the justification is there under the C1 criteria. Kate, did I miss anything you want me to cover?
No, I think you covered everything.
Do I have any questions from the board?
John, could you just comment on availability? Is there any room to provide an additional parking space?
No, if I'll refer to the site plan that was submitted as part of the application.
You don't need to point it out. I just
Okay.
wanted to get on the record that whenever we're granting variances, we always look to have the applicant comply. In this case, there's no available space on the site, so just want to make sure the board understood that.
I agree with that assessment.
Is that fence coming down
I was going to ask the same thing.
from the top diagram?
It's already down.
Okay.
Yes.
Is this a rental?
I mean, I guess it's zoned for that. We have not rented it and don't really have the expectation to.
Okay, if there's no other questions from the board, we'll have Craig's report.
I would like to summarize my August 29, 2024 report. Once again, this is an application at 22 Stockton Place, which is in the RS Residential Seasonal District. You have an existing 3-unit multifamily dwelling with proposed porch reconstruction that consists of a new roof in lieu of the metal framed roof that's there now, awning. And they're looking to replace that, and they seek variances that would allow that to happen. With regards to the completeness review, they've asked for one waiver from the checklist requirements from providing the first floor building elevations. There's no change to those, so therefore, I don't believe that those are necessary to evaluate this project, so therefore, I recommended deeming the application complete. With regards to a summary of the variances, Mr. Halbruner indicated that this is an existing non-conforming structure on a non-conforming lot. So there's a bunch of non-conformities that exist before we even start, and they relate to the lot size, 12,500 square feet, where we have 4,712 exists. The lot size per unit, so there's 3 units. You divide the lot size by the 3 units, you come up with 1,571 square feet, where 2,500 square feet is the minimum requirement. So that doesn't conform. The lot width and lot frontage requirements are both 100 feet. The lot width is 53.405, and the lot frontage is 52.31 feet. And then we have the non-conforming parking situation, The ordinance tells us to reevaluate that whenever they ask for variances. For the 3 units, based on the residential site improvement standards, it comes out to a requirement of 6 spaces where 5 are existing on site, and there's no additional room for those. The improvements themselves create the variances of the building setback line from Stockton Place. 20 foot is the requirement for multifamily dwellings. 16.42 feet is proposed to that roof. The side yard setback, so it also encroaches into the side. 10 feet is the requirement, 5.69 feet is proposed, where 5.69 feet exists. They're not expanding that nonconformity, however, the new improvements do encroach into that. So that's a summary of the variances. I'm going to roll into my general review comments. These should all be conditions of approval. Item number 1 is compliance with Chapter 258 and comply with the Flood Damage Protection Code. Item number 2, we've asked for the approval signature lines to be added to the plans. 3 is our standard condition that we ask that the applicant revise the zoning table to reflect the comments in the review memorandum. I don't think that there's any discrepancies on this one, but that's a standard condition I always ask for in case something changes. Item number 4 is the applicant must comply with Chapter 525, the minimum stormwater management and grading requirements, and that remains in effect throughout construction and afterwards, so that runs with the site. Item number 5 is our standard condition that we request that the applicant replace the sidewalk adjacent to the subject site if there's any damaged sidewalk, and we evaluate that after construction to make sure the construction activities didn't damage any sidewalk. Item number 6 is our standard condition that they have to provide the inspection escrow fee and that the certificate of occupancy is tied to an acceptance of those improvements that are required by the board. Item number 7 is comply with the Cape May Shade Tree Commission, Fire Department, and Public Works Department, and we did receive reports from them. The Fire Department recommended approval with no comments dated 9/5/24. The Public Works Department recommended approval with no comments 9/4/24. The Shade Tree Commission recommended approval dated September 10th, 2024, with no comments, and they did provide us with a copy of the expired HPC approval dated September 19th, 2022, but as they indicated that is expired, they will be required to refreshen that and get approval. Okay, back to number 8. Any approval is conditioned on compliance with all other state, county, and local approvals. 9, I just touched upon, which is the HPC approval. 10, they have to comply with any and all applicable affordable housing requirements at the time of approval. And finally, item number 11, should the board grant approval, they're required to submit the requisite number of plans, revised plans to address any conditions that the board sets to the board engineer for review and approval. Happy to answer any questions the board has.
The stamp, the down spout on the new plans, it's come down from the roof now. Is there going to be more drainage? Is going to be some
There's no
heavy awning?
there's no additional runoff because they're proposing impervious over impervious that's already there.
Okay.
So there's no way the water is running into the ground, so there's no change in lot coverage whatsoever.
At this time, we'll open it up to anyone within 200 feet of the property. Anyone beyond 200 feet? Okay. Closed to the public? You have a question?
I have 2 questions for you.
Okay.
Number 1, you said the property will not be rented, is that true?
But it's not a relevant consideration to the application.
Okay. And number 2,
And if you ask that question and he answers it and then you vote no, they'll think you did that because he's renting, so I just as well not hear it.
okay, and the second question, is the property for sale?
No, it's not.
Okay, because your photos show it, a for sale sign.
What is?
There's a, on there, there's a for sale sign on the,
Oh, I think that's when we bought it.
pictures.
Yeah, that photo.
Okay, no other questions?
Okay. The standard outlined by the board engineer's report is the appropriate standard for the C1 and C2 variances. The lot size and lot width and lot frontage and lot size per unit are appropriate under the C2 standard, as those are kind of immutable characteristics of the lot that cannot be changed. And the remaining 3, 4, 5, and 6 are appropriate under the C2 standard, appropriate to be considered under the C2 standard, which I adopt in accordance with the board engineer's letter. So the motion I recommend being made is and how you vote is up to you, but we always make it in the affirmative. It's a motion to grant variances 1 and 2 under the C1 standard, and motion and variances 3, 4, 5, and 6 under the C2 standard, subject to the with the waiver outlined by the board engineer, recommended by him, and the conditions 1 through 11 outlined in the engineer's report, page 5. That's the motion I recommend being made, but how you vote is up to you.
Okay, can we have that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Venuto,
A second.
seconded by Mr. Zetzer.
Mr. Levin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Bodnar?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm here for the next
You're
one, so
here
I
for the
might as well
next one.
stay.
So our next application is William and Elizabeth Grace, 1405 Harbor Lane.
Or maybe I'll have one. We don't have enough chairs. Okay. Okay.
Ms. Monzo, if you'll introduce whoever's going to be giving testimony?
I have a couple exhibits. Should I just wait to hand them out?
Hand them out now, that's fine. Are they marked?
Yes.
What are we marking now?
We have A1, which is 4 pages.
Can you just give me like the briefest description, like one word or two?
Zoning permit and previous approved plans. And then A2 and A3 are, is an aerial and a streetscape photograph. Those ones too.
Thank you.
Sorry, Paul.
Let me pass it.
Hey, thanks.
Good evening again. My name's Kate Monzo from Monzo Catanese Delalis. I am here on behalf of William and Elizabeth Grace. The property address is 1405 Harbor Lane. I have a few people with me tonight. I have Bill Grace here, who is the owner of the property. I also have Lance Bowman, who is the contractor on site, and then I have our two professionals back here. We have Terry Thomas, who is our architect and engineer, and then we also have Paul Cates, our engineer.
I'm sorry.
Paul Cates.
K-A-E-T-E-S?
K-A-T, yes. My name with an S. So this application is for the construction of a single-family home in the R3 zone, which is a permitted use. There was a previously existing home on the property that had obtained permits for a renovation. The exhibit that was just handed out that's marked A1 is a copy of the prior approved zoning permit and the approved plans. However, during the renovation process, the home was inadvertently demolished in its entirety. Lance Bowman will be able to elaborate on that in just a moment. What is proposed now is exactly the same as what was approved with the prior zoning permit. However, because the home that existed had nonconformities, approval for reconstruction, even in the same footprint, requires approval from this board. The lot area, building setback to Harbor Lane, lot width, lot frontage, and side yard setbacks are all nonconforming conditions that existed with the prior home. These are all proposed to remain exactly as they were. The lot coverage, floor area ratio, and building height are increasing slightly from what was previously constructed on the property, but they will not be exceeding what is approved in the zone. And these are also the same items that were contemplated during the prior renovation work that had previously obtained approval. So I understand that there may have been some confusion in the application, and you'll hear testimony confirming this, but there is no increase in the building height, floor area ratio, or lot coverage has occurred from the prior renovation permits to now. There have been some minor cosmetic changes to the plans that do not impact the bulk requirements of the zone. The only difference between the numbers are slight. The decrease in the proposed floor area ratio, it was previously approved with the zoning permit at 39.7%. We're now proposing 38.8%. And the side yard setback, which was previously approved at 5 feet on the east side of the property, we're now proposing 5.08. So to begin, I just wanted to invite Mr. Grace to say just a few words about his history with the property and what his vision is for the proposed renovations.
Okay, let me swear in the whole gang. Every name that you said before, I'm going to swear them all in. Our board attorney remains under oath. Will each of you please raise your right hand? Do each of you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Can I get the name of Mr. Thomas? There's a Mr. Thomas.
Yes, Terry Thomas.
Terrence? George
Ray Thomas is my given name, but I was the third. They ran out of other names like Junior.
I see. So architect, engineer?
Both.
Architect, engineer, and land.
Engineer. Thank you.
Builder.
Thank you.
Look at each one of them.
Bill, you can go ahead. There you go.
Yeah, my name's Bill Grace. My wife lives there. Just a short thing. We built this house, I think, 23 years ago. It was Liz and I and our 3 children. So now it's Liz and I and 3 children and 11 grandkids. So we decided to pursue the building of the renovation. So that's kind of pretty much what I'm here to explain.
Thank you, Bill. So with me as well, I also have Lance Bowman, who is the contractor, and we just wanted to have him, provide an explanation for the board as to how we got to the point where the house was demolished, which required us to come before the board today. So Lance, Mr. Bowman, you're the contractor that was doing work on the site, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And can you explain for the board how this property was unique in its demolition and how we got to the point of total demolition?
Sure. So the demolition in the plans was quite substantial, and it had to be done pretty methodically from the top down. All of the roof, lots of bearing walls, all of the decks. In general, quite a bit of demolition was required to get it to a stage where it could then be rebuilt. So we did that over the course of a couple of weeks in stages. We got down to the second floor, and there was some structural damage to some of the joists, so we decided to remove those. I got to a point where we had the foundation and the first floor, at which point in looking at the plans, we realized that the existing foundation was in fact supposed to be removed and replaced with a 2x4 foundation with plywood walls and then a stone facade. Well, in order to do that, when you only have a first floor remaining, the only way to do that is to demo it. So we made the decision at that point to have a demolition contractor take down the foundation with the expectation of rebuilding the treated walls like it showed on the plans. He told us that it would be a couple of days. In between that time, in considering what was being done, I spoke with the owner, my partner, and we decided that in fact, keeping the existing foundation really made the most sense structurally. So we proposed a way to keep that, demoing only parts of it, so that we could keep I think the issue was making sure that we had enough parking in the garage, and the block walls weren't allowing us to do that. So we made a slight modification and decided that we could, in fact, keep that foundation. In between doing that, the demolition contractor came and took down the walls, at which point we had no foundation walls left. So at that point, I went back to the architect, and we revised the plans to show new block foundation walls being built. And once I had those plans, we rebuilt the foundation as it was. And it was at that point where we received the stop work order because the foundation had been torn down.
And at what point did you become aware that a variance was needed to continue construction?
When I got the stop work order,
And once that stop work order was issued, work ceased immediately, correct?
it did, correct?
And you're going to be the contractor on the site moving forward?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask a question? What was the nature of the renovation to be done before it was demolished?
What was the nature of it?
Yeah, what was being done? Was it all interior?
No, it was quite substantial. It was essentially rebuilding the property.
I understand that, but what I'm asking is, was it getting any bigger?
No, well, that's not true. I guess there was an expansion off of the back of it that had been previously approved over where the decks were off the back.
Okay, I guess the part that I'm struggling with, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong, I'm not speaking badly about the application. I have
Sure.
no position on that. I'm just trying to understand if each, like the side yards, am I looking at the wrong one maybe? Was it being expanded up or back on any of the side yards that are short?
What was previously approved by the board is exactly what we were doing. I can't say because I wasn't involved in that application. I can't tell you exactly. I'm sure Terry, when he speaks, can. But we weren't we're not proposing anything different than what was previously approved.
I understand that. Maybe you're not the one to answer this.
I don't believe I am.
Terry can provide some, or Mr. Thomas can provide some
That would be helpful.
testimony.
Okay, yeah, we'll do that then.
Yeah.
That's okay.
From our end, what I want to stress is that there was nothing at all premeditated or nefarious about what we were
No,
doing.
I'm not implying that.
No, I know you're
I'm
not.
trying to figure if you needed a variance before. I'm trying to figure out if the fact that you knocked it down is what's triggering the variance, because I'm having trouble understanding how you didn't need a variance previously when you have, the side yards are too small anyway. So if you were doing anything to increase that nonconformity, even before you knocked it down, you needed a variance. So then I'm trying to figure out if there's really a difference between this application and what you would have needed anyway. So but that's what I'm trying to figure out is why you didn't need a variance before you demolished. Maybe Terry can answer that.
What we did is we took the plan and put it before the zoning officer, and he determined that we did not need a variance.
I understand he made that determination, but now I'm making a determination. So I'm trying to figure out if was any part of the building being expanded in the side yard that is 5 feet and 7.8 feet?
Yes.
Yes. So didn't that require a variance? Isn't that an expansion of a nonconforming
That
structure?
was not Mr. Britton's conclusion.
I'm not asking what Mr. Britton thought. I'm trying to help you, okay? What I'm trying to figure out is, everyone's focused on the fact that you knocked down the building, and now you need a variance. But what I'm saying is, I think you may have needed a variance anyway, so I'm not sure there's a difference between whether the building was knocked down or not.
I think you're right.
Well, then, instead of trying to tell Mr. Britton thought, which is interesting and curious, but not really what I'm asking. I'm trying to ask if the original renovation expanded anything in the side yards that don't meet the requirements.
A continuation of the deficient side yards did occur.
Okay,
No.
and that need, then, did it?
That's not, your sheet ZB2, and I've been pulling my hair out because there's so much information it doesn't, it's not consistent. If you look at ZB2, it's a proposed plot plan. And on that plot plan, it shows proposed addition above the rear portion of the structure.
Craig, let me
Right?
ca- Right, Craig,
Okay.
let me catch up to you.
Okay, go ahead.
Listen, I want to bring out the plan you're talking about. I'm not sure. Do we have what you're looking at?
Yeah, it's the second page of that.
Oh, okay, okay. I'm trying to see like a before and after. Just couldn't figure this out.
So if you look at the proposed plot plan at the bottom of that page, where it shows proposed addition above on the back portion closest to Devil's Reef,
Wait, step
right here,
in. Steps in.
proposed addition above, it's stepped in to meet the setbacks.
I think that's true.
So on that plan, I think the zoning officer issued a building permit based on complying with the building setbacks. Our ordinance allows that, right. And you renovate, so you're renovating the front portion of the structure, internal renovations. There's nothing expanding into the setbacks. And the rear addition was stepped in so that it met the setbacks. It meets the side yard and the rear yard setbacks. Therefore, you could pull a permit, and it was by right.
Thank you, Craig.
Is that,
So they didn't need a variance then?
they didn't need a variance.
Okay, great.
And I agree with Mr. Britton for issuing the permit.
Yep, all right, good. So they didn't expand the portion of the building that is within the setback?
Correct.
So you- All right, thank you, Craig, that is helpful. And that's what you're constructing now? You're building the exact same thing as on that plan? You're stepping it in?
Yeah, the plan has not changed one iota from the plans of which your building permit is obtained.
Thank you.
Mr.
Well,
Thomas?
that's not true. The one porch is a little bigger, so the plan approved had an FAR of 39.1, and it actually now dropped to 38.9. But for all intents and purposes, it's the same.
That's not in a setback anywhere, though?
No.
Okay.
Mr. Thomas, I know that you've already answered some questions, but I just wanted to qualify you as an expert. Has Mr. Thomas been before this board?
Not,
This board?
not these particular
Okay.
members.
Well, can you give us a little background on your education
Turn
and
on your microphone,
certifications?
please.
Press the button.
Yep.
There we go. My given name is George Ray Thomas. I've been in practice for 5 decades. I was educated at Bucknell University. I'm licensed in several states as an architect, an engineer, and a professional planner. And I have not had the pleasure of coming before you, this particular group.
Does the board accept Mr. Thomas as an expert in engineering and
Are you
architecture?
licensed in New Jersey?
I am, in all those disciplines.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you. I know that there has already been some discussion about the existing conditions on the site, but could you just go through, the property location, the zoning district, surrounding properties and uses, and what other permitted uses?
Yes. The property location is 1405 Harbor Lane, also known as lots 76 and 76.01 and 77 of Block 1160 here in Cape May. The zoning district is R3 medium density, and we are, of course, a permitted use in that zone.
And can you touch on the relief that is being sought tonight? What variances do we need in connection with this application?
On our chart, which is on ZB1, 6,500 square feet is required, and we are 6,000. A 50-foot width is required, and we are 40 feet. The front of the existing building, the requirement is 20, and we have always been 10 feet 8 inches, or 10.66. The rear yard setback is required to be 25, and we are 104 and a quarter from the rear property line. Side yards are 8 feet. We are 2 inches deficient on the one side, which is why I answered the question the way I did to Mr. King. And we are 3 feet, almost 3 feet deficient on the other side, but not in the addition.
And are all of these conditions, were they pre-existing with the prior home before it was knocked down?
Yes.
And what criteria are we requesting these variances under? Is it both C1 and C2?
Yes, it is both C1 and C2. C1, the hardship, I think, is self-evident. This is a lot is largely water, relatively small lot, and yet we're, on the one side, there's a very large structure beside us, and significant buildings continuing in a northerly direction from our lot. We have some aerial photographs. Should I pass them out, or?
These are A2 and A3. Yes.
A2 is an aerial view. We are the house immediately to the left of the multi-family unit that's to our north. You can see the docks that extend out into the water from the property. A3 is a street-level view, which shows the size of the building that's immediately north of us. And this is what existed in, the dates in these drawings are, in these photographs are February of 2022. We were a 3-story building over parking then, and we would like to be a 3-story parking over building now.
So we touched on how we meet the C1 criteria, and what about the C2, the balancing criteria? Can you go over the standard?
We must show special reasons that the use promotes one of the purposes of zoning. We must satisfy the positive and negative criteria by demonstrating that no substantial detriment to the public good. There's an aesthetic benefit to what we're doing. We're building a fully compliant building from a fire and flood standpoint. It's a significant improvement to the structure, both aesthetically and functionally, and it serves the need of 11 grandchildren. That's unquestionably was part of the program.
And what about the negative criteria? Is there any substantial detriment to the public good or substantial impairment to the intent and purpose of the zone plan?
Well, looking at it micro neighborly, we are nothing but a positive impact. We were in this exact same setback geometry that we were in 2022, and yet we build a newer and stronger building. That was part of why Lance took the building apart, to make sure we ended up with something that was structurally viable.
And we have the one photo that's an aerial here where you're looking at the other houses that are located next door. What is proposed is not going to, it's exactly within that same footprint there. Would you say that, you know, this house, with the setbacks, is it consistent with the scheme of the neighborhood?
It shows the front yard of our building as it existed in 2022 and as we proposed to construct is exactly in line with the building. None of these buildings are set back 20 feet from the front property line.
And part of the reason for that is because the upland buildable portion is so much smaller than, what would typically be contemplated with a lot in this zone. Is that correct?
Yes, and compared to our neighbors to the north, ours is by far the smallest.
And when you balance the benefits against the negative impacts, is there adequate support, in your opinion, for the grant of these variances?
I absolutely believe that's the case. The variance requirement is really only necessitated by the fact that the building came all the way down.
And I also have Paul Cates here, who prepared a variance plan and also a grading plan. I plan to have Terry, or Mr. Thomas, address the comments in Mr. Hurlis's memo. Would you rather go through that now, and then I'll have Mr. Cates, or do you want me to bring him back up?
I would like to ask the architect questions.
Okay.
Is that possible?
Sure.
Okay, so should the board grant approval, ultimately, I have to do compliance reviews. You indicated that this is the exact same building that was approved through the construction office as what is you're proposing here tonight.
Yes.
But there are some changes.
Yeah, there are, yeah.
Can you highlight those and explain exactly what those are? Because I was never given the approved plans, so I had no way of comparing that, and I'm kind of doing that on the fly tonight.
Sure.
And you handed out an exhibit, which I think is the existing plans tonight.
I didn't hand that out, so I don't know.
Exhibit A1, which is 4 pages, is the zoning
the
permit,
smaller
and
version.
that's,
Zoning permit,
yes,
and these are the
those are the approved
that were
plans.
approved.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm matching those up with your plans that you've submitted as part of this application. And I did notice on the second floor, and they're at different scales, so you can, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like the kitchen was expanded?
The inside was changed, that's absolutely
Okay.
true. But the square footage of the spaces were changed only minimally. And I have a series of numbers here. Let me find the latest number, which was on my phone.
Can I just explain something that might help you understand why this is so critically important? Because Mr. Thomas may not know my practice, Ms. Monzo probably does, is that when I do the resolution, I take the chart from Craig's report and I insert it into the resolution, and that's what gets built. So if your math is different than Craig's chart, it turns out to be a disaster. So I've always just made it so that it's always Craig's chart. So we have to change Craig's chart, we change it tonight, and then the resolution looks like what we changed. But if you have plans to Craig and he has it that it's, 2,300 square feet, and then you want to build 2,410 square feet, it's 2,300 square feet. So we have to have Craig's chart.
The response to your
Another reason, and just for the board's pleasure, another reason I'm asking this question is because the application said that they're building exactly the same structure as what was approved through the construction office. What I'm saying here is I'm comparing these and I'm seeing differences. I think it's important for you to explain those differences to me and the board so that they're aware what changed from the demolition, the approved plans to what's proposed now in front of them. And there are changes.
Mr. Hurlis, if I may,
Yeah, and I
briefly addressed this in my opening, and I just want to make sure that,
Okay.
that representation, that everything was exactly the same, came from our office. The plans that Mr. Thomas submitted do have the correct numbers on them. There were some minor changes. Initially, what was approved was a higher floor area ratio and also a setback of, I think, 5 feet. And then when we went back for this application, the floor area ratio was reduced. Mr. Thomas is going to give the exact numbers, and also the setback was increased. So both of these are positive impacts.
When he gives those exact numbers, I'd like to know where the reductions were made so that I just am aware.
Sure.
So I can ensure that the
When
compliance plan.
when we understood your questions, we went back and got very precise by moving the cursor and the computer around inside the building.
Okay.
Okay, the first floor, there's no change. It was approved at 839 square feet, and we sit before you with a plan that's 839 square feet tonight. The second floor got smaller because the decks got larger. The number had been 832. The kitchen changed, which you pointed out, and now that's smaller. It's 788.5 square feet.
788.5?
Yes, sir?
Okay. Explain to me, so I'm looking at the approved plan. There is a deck at the lower corner that's been added where the living room was. So you lost floor area ratio of space there. There's a screen deck. Looks like it got smaller where the kitchen was expanded to the rear. And that looks like a significant increase over what the deck was.
When we ran the cursor, excluding the deck areas, we got 788.5 square feet.
Okay. I'm looking for a verbal explanation. So your plan here tonight shows a new deck at the front corner where the living room is.
Yes.
That's new.
Yes.
Okay, that's new. That's different.
It got bigger, but the decks got even bigger.
The approved plan from the construction office shows the whole rear of the second floor having a large deck, screen deck. Is that true?
Yeah, but it wasn't as deep as this one.
It wasn't as deep. Okay, explain that.
This one's 6 feet deep. I think that was 5. I don't have that drawing in front of me, so I can't respond. Do you have that drawing?
I have what you gave, so I have your application form and what you handed me tonight. I'm just trying to make sense of this.
Is this because we're flirting with the floor area ratio?
And changes, because it looks like the kitchen got bigger and the decks got significantly less, which would increase the floor area ratio. And he's showing a reduction on that floor where it looks like to me the floor area ratio is increased, which doesn't make
What I
sense.
have. What he's wants me to comment on is what was
Can I
before,
just- we have
and
to
I don't
maintain
have
the
that in
record.
front of me.
Take his mic away so they can talk to each other without it. I don't want you to get. Mr. Bowman, while they're doing that, can you tell me, is the elevation of it, of the home changing as a result of the renovation? Is it the flood elevation? Is it going to be higher?
I don't believe there was any change to the elevation, no. Because again, the existing foundation was supposed to stay.
And is it?
I figured it out.
Mr. King,
I figured
Mr.
it
King, can you move your mic back, Mr. King? I'm having a hard time hearing you back here.
Again, what we did, I'm sure you're familiar with, just take the cursor and run around the plan, and I have absolute
I think
confidence.
I think I understand it now. So using your dimensions, it looks to me like, so the deck was added into the living room space,
Yes,
and then a screen deck was cut into the kitchen area.
yes,
It looked on this, because this is a reduced plan, it looked like the actual deck expanded out the back. Those are dimension lines, okay?
It did not.
So you've added 2 deck areas into that approved floor area that have reduced the floor area to 788.5.
correct.
Okay, all right, I understand that floor. Take me to the third floor,
Third floor went from 713 to 702.
okay? And what changed there? The deck was made bigger?
That deck now matches the deck on the second floor.
Okay,
And then there's also the deck over above the kitchen.
gotcha,
And again, when we ran the cursor around, that's the number that we got.
understood. I'm just looking for the rationale why things are being changed.
Oh, I understand. They're fair questions.
And then the top is a roof, a roof plan showing your roof improvements, right? So there's
Yes.
no floor area ratio up there. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Did you say that there's a difference in the setback?
No, the setbacks are identical. Well, that's not true. The one
Have we been
setback grew an
supplied-
inch.
Have we been supplied with a survey of the original? All these surveys that I see here, and I'm confused, there's just so much paper. It says existing, but I don't think I have anything of what it was previous, before it was torn down, where that foundation was.
Well,
Looks like
this-
Mr. Britton
This plan
might-
shows existing and proposed.
But existing is not what I want to really see. I want to see what was there before you tore it down.
I think Mr. Britton has it. He's holding it up in the audience if the board wants to ask him for it.
What are you doing?
Wait,
Time out, time out.
Wait,
time out,
wait.
time out. Before we go throw new documents in. Is that a document we don't have yet?
I think so.
Okay, let's mark it down.
Yeah.
We'll mark this as Exhibit A4. This is the survey prepared by Cape Land Surveying that was submitted and approved with the zoning permit application.
Can I just make a copy of that maybe, because that's part of his record? I'll bring it back so everybody can see.
The foundation there's a foundation that's staying. Can you just describe that foundation?
There is a foundation there now, a new foundation there.
Oh, it's all new?
Correct. We weren't stopped until the new foundation went up. That's really what caused the stop, was me calling in an inspection of the new foundation. We put the new foundation exactly where the one we tore down was.
Same spot.
So, within an inch?
Within an inch, that's where we gave the inch.
Okay, sorry.
The original survey was 5 foot. When we surveyed
Turn on your mic, sir.
the original survey was the 5 foot. When we surveyed the existing foundation that was newly constructed, that's where we picked up that .08 on the 5 foot side. So the foundation, I guess in being cautious, they erred on the inside of their layout most likely, and that created that additional inch essentially, which is the .08 that you're seeing in the existing conditions survey on our plan, which is what is presently at the site, a foundation. Maybe that helps.
It does. I was just kind of hoping you were using the old foundation, so it would be a hardship to do a new one, but you kind of did a new one, so it's okay. Try.
I think we were still going through Mr. Hurlis's comments on his memo, unless you're
Yeah,
good.
it's your presentation. I just had to ask, I needed that question answered before we went further.
So are you confident that you're building it at the same flood elevation that was built, whatever the testimony was 13 years ago, or is it increasing, 23 years ago?
No, because we're all over a garage, we're above the required flood elevation.
Okay, so you're not making it more flood, you're not improving its flood status?
We are with this application because of the concrete block. So what we were going to do before,
Let's talk about some
That's-
positive criteria.
thank you
Talk
for the
about flood.
softball. That's part of the positive criteria. We're making a more flood-resistant building. We're not making it taller, but the part of the building that is below base flood elevation will now be all masonry.
And was the plan that was approved all masonry or no?
No, it was not. And that's one of the things that triggered the demolition. We had used treated studs because of the parking requirement. We couldn't have 8-inch walls, we had to have 4-inch walls. Now we will have 4-inch walls using 4-inch block. But again, we were working with the existing walls, which were wood stud.
Okay, so from flood prevention, for flood considerations and prevention and mitigation, you believe that the building you're constructing now that has been demolished is actually a better building that would have been constructed? if it hadn't been
Significantly
demolished?
better. Concrete block can get a bath and not know that it got a bath, just clean it. The wood studs you can damage significantly. But they were existing, so that's why we left them there.
And that concrete block, that's also one of the purposes of zoning that would be advanced by this application to secure from flood, is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So I would like to move on to Mr. Cates, have him testify as to his plans. He prepared a variance plan as well as a grading plan. I know that one of the issues was the inconsistencies with the numbers. Paul has, or Mr. Cates has one varying number than what was on Mr. Thomas's plans, but those plans will be revised to be consistent with Mr. Thomas's.
That's all we need to hear? That Mr. Thomas's plans govern?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
So you have a FOIA ratio in your resolution of .397, you can't exceed that. That's all, that's, from where I sit, that's what I care most about.
I think it's 398 or 38.
.388 is what Mr. Thomas's plans,
Okay, I'm going to revise the,
which is,
Permit plan, it was 39.7. But that was part of the change that we talked about earlier with the decks.
okay, and that, where does that deck land on this chart? The thing that changed an inch or two or whatever, where is that on Craig's chart? Are you still going to have a
that's the,
setback line of 10.6?
that's the setback of 5.08 feet.
And what is that going to be?
No, it is, that's what.
That's correct, I have to
That,
change
yeah,
that.
it was 5, and now it's 5.08 after the foundation was put in 0.08 inches
Inside.
to the good side.
So from where you sit, Craig, your chart with that change on FOIA ratio, that chart is okay,
I believe that it's okay.
as long as you agree. Just, I want to give you what you're asking for, that's kind of the idea.
There's one other that I'm not sure if we went over, which was on Mr. Hurlis's chart, the rear yard setback, the proposed. It is listed on here as 111.35 feet. Both Mr. Cates and Mr. Thomas's plans show a rear yard setback of, I think, 104.
104.25.
Okay.
That's important.
Unless you're building over the water, you're not going to have a problem with the rear yard setback.
104.25,
Yes.
it's in the chart now. Good catch, Ms. Mondo.
Thank you. So we'll move on to Mr. Cates now. Mr. Cates, can you give the board the background on your education and certifications?
Yeah. So I have a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineer. I've been practicing in civil engineering field for the last 22 years. I was licensed in 2011 as a professional engineer, in 2019 as a professional planner. I currently represent 4 boards in South Jersey and have testified before many others as an expert, including this one, on, I think, just one occasion.
Does the board accept Mr. Cates as an expert
Yes.
in engineering
And planning.
and planning?
Thank you.
So can you, Mr. Cates, just go through your plans briefly for the board? Just confirm, what the specifics are on your plan.
Yeah. So we provided the 24/36 plan, which is the zoning plan, which essentially mirrors the discussion that Terry has provided. It shows all the setbacks, shows location of the structure, as well as an updated survey showing the current foundation where it sits on the property. In addition to that, we provided the grading and drainage plan. That plan went into significantly more detail of the site. We are proposing 34 linear feet of underground storage, which is a 12-inch porous pipe in a 3x4 stone trench. It will have yard drains on either side, and the intent is to tie the downspouts directly to that system. In addition, we're showing the grading of the lot, which largely follows the current grading. The site, as it sat, is below the edge of the road, so moving water towards the road was not feasible. So we are showing the water flowing from the front of the property, down the side yards, and towards the bay. There'll be no impact from grading on either lot on each side. In addition, we do show lateral connections, all the utility connections, as well as profiles of the underground storage. I think that pretty much covers what we're providing.
And we heard Mr. Thomas's testimony as to the variance relief and why, in this case, it is appropriate. And do you agree with that testimony? Do you-
Yeah, I think he covered it all.
And you've reviewed Mr. Hurlis's memo and agree to make any of the requested revisions, correct?
Yes, I think everything we can adhere to.
Most importantly being the numbers on the variance chart.
Yes.
Okay. So does the board have any questions for Mr. Cates?
I do. On one of the existing plan, it shows where the foundation is, but then on another one, it has behind it, proposed building overhang. Is that the decks? This one shows nothing, and then on the other ones, it shows. Why is it
That's,
then-
so this is the existing condition, which currently does not have that building overhang. And then here you'll see this is the proposed building overhang, which is consistent with what is shown on the proposed grading plan. And should be consistent with everything in Mr. Thomas's plans.
So you didn't have an overhang area for the previous building?
Well, it's just not shown on that one, on the existing foundation that's there on the site, because that portion has not been constructed yet. It was, the stop work order was put in place before that was constructed. So that's why that current site plan does not show it. It was there previous to the demolition, it's just currently not there.
The blocks that are there now, is that where the foundation is going to be?
Yes,
There are some
that's
blocks on that.
staying where it is,
That's,
100%.
and how come the floor ratio can change so much? You know that? Rather than correcting your notes?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
How come the floor ratio is more, the square footage is 1,300 before, and now it's
So-
2,300?
That was there was some misleading things on this plan.
Oh, okay.
So on Mr. Thomas's plan, on sheet ZB1, there is a column that says existing conditions are previously approved. That doesn't necessarily relate to the approved plans, I don't think. They're showing the habitable ground floor area at 22.9%, and they're increasing it 38.8%. I don't believe that's accurate. You, Mr. Thomas? But what, the 22.9%, what is that?
That's what, you have a 2022 plan, you have a 2023 plan, and you have a 2024 plan. And that's part of the thing that's confusing. The 2022 plan was the 22, and I forget the number exactly.
Okay, 22.9.
The plan that was approved by the code enforcement office was the 39.1. And the plan we have before you tonight is 38.8. So the FAR increased from the 2022 plan because of the addition on the third floor and the addition out the back both. But as far as the 2023 plan, which was approved by the code enforcement office and under which we were doing the demolition actually, and I'm supposed to have this green light on, we're doing essentially the same, slightly less with what we have before you tonight than what was approved in the code enforcement office. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Kind of?
How many bedrooms did you have in the previous building that was torn down?
I don't know that there's a bedroom increase. That I don't.
I
You
think
mean
there's a
the
bedroom
2023
increase.
plan, it's exactly the same. From the 2022, I don't know.
The permit and the plans that were attached to that showed 3 bedrooms. You're now proposing 4 bedrooms, I think.
Really?
I
I
think-
thought it was the same.
Unless my count is wrong, but this is at such a small scale, I'm having a hard time reading it. So,
There are definitely 4 on this plan.
so if I look at existing, I count 2 bedrooms on the second floor, and I count 1 large bedroom on the third floor. Is
You
that
took
correct?
the 2022
So
plan?
there's 3 bedrooms. And then the proposed, I count 3 bedrooms on the first floor. I count a master bedroom on the third floor for a total of 4. So we're going from 3 bedrooms to 4 bedrooms. It doesn't increase the parking.
Okay.
The trigger is 5. So if they got to the 5th bedroom, that would necessitate another parking space.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Change the chart for the number of bedrooms,
and,
Craig?
What's that?
Should we change the chart to number of
Yeah,
bedrooms to
I'll
4?
amend that when I go through my.
Okay.
I already made that note.
Mr. Thomas, even though we do have the increase in the floor area ratio, we're still below what is permitted for this zone, correct?
Significantly, yes.
Do you believe there's any negative impact on the zone plan, zoning ordinance, or the adjacent properties or nearby properties?
I don't believe there is. You know, there's an enhancement to the structure, which we talked about, and the building is no bigger than what it was permitted to be.
Thank you.
Are they done their, make sure they're done their presentation?
Are you finished with your presentation?
I'd like to say a couple words in closing, but I can wait until,
You want to wait till we open to the public?
Yeah.
And that way you can incorporate their ideas.
Okay, so we'll have Craig's report.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to summarize my October 16th, 2024 review review memorandum. Just gonna, I didn't bring any water tonight. So this is a property at 1405 Harbor Lane, which is in the R3 Medium Density Residential District. They're proposing a single-family dwelling, which is a permitted use. We've gone quite exhaustively through the criteria, what we're doing here, but a total of 4 bedrooms and 2,329.5 square foot of habitable area are proposed. I think you've modified that tonight. We've received that, so we have that modification, and we'll take that in effect. So I'll put a question mark next to that. With regards to completeness,
2384.
2384, that's more than what I had.
Oh, previously approved. Tonight, it's 2329.5.
Okay, so I have the updated number.
Yeah.
All right,
What do we,
nothing. I just want to make sure
This
my
is
number was
staying the
correct.
same.
We're good. We are good. Okay, completeness review. They asked for waivers from 2 items. The 4 photographs, and I think they provided additional photographs tonight, so I don't have a problem with waiving that. And then from providing the plans and profiles of utility layouts, they've given me the utility information that I needed. I don't think that the profiles are necessary, so therefore I did support the waiver request from that and did recommend deeming this application complete. I'll summarize the variances. So let me just talk about this globally from the ordinance standpoint. So our ordinance permits you to put an addition on a structure that is existing nonconforming with regards to setbacks, so long as that addition meets all the additional setbacks and doesn't create any other nonconformities. And I think the zoning officer was correct in issuing that permit because they stepped that addition in, met all the setbacks, didn't exceed the floor area ratio, didn't trigger any variances, therefore they could go pull a permit and not have to come to this board. By demolishing the structure, you lose that protection. So now the variances kick back in. Right? So that section of the ordinance no longer applies. You now have to comply with our ordinances. So anywhere where we're treating this, you essentially treat this as a new structure. Okay? So therefore, we're putting a new structure on a lot that is undersized, 6,000 square foot exists, 6,250 square foot is the minimum requirement. The lot width and lot frontage are also non-conforming and existing non-conforming. 40-foot exists, 50-foot is the requirement for both of those items. So that's the lot, we're dealing with a lot. The structure itself has non-compliance and requires variances from the building setback line from Harbor Lane, 20-foot is the requirement, 10.66 feet is proposed. The side yard setback for each side is 8 feet. One side has a setback of 5.08 feet, and one side has a setback of 7.8 feet. If you take a look at the building height, that complies. Lot coverage does not exceed the 45% maximum. And the floor area ratio is .388, where .40 is the maximum permitted. And I'd like to make one change in my zoning table, so Mr. King, pay attention.
Big moment.
The parking calculation indicated in my chart is for 3 bedrooms. It's actually 4 bedrooms. The requirements, everything else stays the same. They're required to, they are proposing to, therefore it's a conforming situation. There's no variances necessary from that. Okay, so that's a summary of the variances. Okay, going through the general review comments, and these all should be conditions of approval. They have to comply with Chapter 258, the Flood Damage Protection Code. They are within the flood zone here, so they have to comply. The plan notes on Plan ZB2, and I sort of touched on this in some of my questioning, they reference the existing structure to be renovated and proposed addition above. That's kind of old. We've demolished the structure now, so this is a new structure, so those notes should be revised. Item number 3 I talked about, and they answered my questions with regards to, but it dealt with the discrepancies, and I'm not going to go back into that, but we've figured that part out. Item number 4, this development is not considered major development. The applicant did provide a grading and drainage plan that I believe meets the ordinance requirements of Chapter 525, and therefore we found that design acceptable. And item number 5 is piggybacks onto that. That Chapter 525, the minimum grading and stormwater management requirements, runs with the property and the construction, so if there's ever any issues created, they have to address those. Item number 6, 7, and 8 deal with the landscaping plan that they provided. All of that was satisfactory. Item number 9 is our standard condition that we evaluate the sidewalk after construction and have the applicant replace that to the satisfaction of the board engineer. Item number 10, there's a retaining wall that was on the plan. Is that still on the plan, Mr. Cates?
I thought that was being reconstructed, Terry, is that staying?
It might.
Could be reconstructed. Yes.
Okay. So we wanted the construction detail added to the plans to verify it's not greater than 2 feet. Otherwise, a variance would be necessary. Item number 11 is our standard condition that they have to post the inspection escrow, and the certificate of occupancy is tied to the satisfactory inspection of the improvements that are required. 12 is they have to comply with the requirements of the Shade Tree Commission, Fire Department, and Public Works Department, and we received reports from the Fire Department dated 9/5/24 recommending approval with no comments. Public Works Department recommended approval dated 9/4/24 with no comments. And the Shade Tree Commission recommended approval with the following conditions. They asked you to preserve the 2 cypress trees on the west side of the property. Is there any issue with it?
Greg, they changed their report. There is some typewritten part. Did you see that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Or if not possible, I have that. I'm always looking for the handwriting. Or if not possible, find space to add a shade tree on the property, possibly in the area of the north corner of the property labeled proposed grass landscape. They've already added a proposed street tree to the plan, so I believe they're satisfying. But you don't have any issues with saving that tree?
If possible.
Okay.
No issues.
So what we like to do, if there's ever recommendations that are made by one of the commissions, if you can't comply, you got to let us know now. Or you have to go back and talk to them.
Do you know where that tree is? What's the date of that letter, Greg?
This is, the Shade Tree Commission is dated 9/17/24. And 10/17?
Because they wanted you to review new plans.
Oh, okay.
So then you recommended they look at it?
Gotcha. Oh, I see it. Okay.
Yeah.
There is a revision date on there. It's a little new format for me. Sorry.
Well, I thought that was a good way to do it.
I wish they
don't know.
typed them all, because some of these guys have chicken scratch handwriting.
The only way to fit all that information, Craig, in that small space.
I'm getting better at reading it.
We tried, but because they had the second set of plans, that was the difference.
Are you able to save them during construction?
Yeah, probably, we'll just have to try. They grow, I didn't realize how they grow.
We had a hard time with anything growing there because of the salt water. And then we planted it.
Man, I can't let you, unless you're at a microphone and I swear you in, I can't, I'm sorry. If you want to speak, you're allowed, I can't.
I don't think so.
Do we have an answer?
No. The answer would have to be, we're going to try, but it shows a,
We're going to try. It's an 8-foot setback, so it's, I think you could probably trim the tree, but we're not 100% sure what it is.
Okay.
We've been trying to study photographs.
So what I recommend is the applicant should be required to comply with the tree requirements in the ordinance. There is a there's removal requirements. If it's within a certain proximity to the foundation, they can be removed. If not, they have to be preserved and protected. If they're being removed, there's usually a 2-for-1 replacement.
Yeah, I mean, we can throw them off.
Okay? So that's probably the easiest way to just address this. Okay?
Yes, we will comply.
All right. All right. Item number 13, they have to comply with any and all other necessary state, county, and local approvals. I don't know whether the construction of a new dwelling triggers any CAFR or New Jersey DEP.
They don't care new or old.
Okay. But you're required to comply with that, just being advised. 14, this project is not located within the historic district. 15, they're required to comply with any and all applicable affordable housing requirements. And then item number 16, they have to revise the plans consistent with the board's approval and meet all the items of compliance that the board sets. That's a summary of my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any more questions from anyone? You're waiting for the public portion, and then you'll speak. Okay, so,
Just one thing about a CAFR permit you mentioned. Because this foundation is gone, will they look at it as, like, we're looking at this as new construction? Will they, in turn, not that it has anything to do with
My experience is if you're in the same footprint, you're fine.
Okay.
But I'm not going to,
That's on.
they have to do their due diligence and comply.
They're not in the same.
What?
okay, we're going to open it up to anyone within 200 feet of the property that wishes to speak. Could you go to the microphone, turn it on? You'll be sworn in.
Will you please state your name, spell your last name, and then I'm going to swear you in. Oh, I'm sorry. And then give your address, and then I'm going to swear you in. Go ahead.
D. Lanzalotti, Lanzalotti, 4 Harbor Cove, Cape May, New Jersey.
Okay, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
So help me God, I swear. I'll be real brief and real quick. I've known Bill and Liz Grace for over 30 years, and I live at 4 Harbor Cove, and my living room looks directly out at their what was their building. And I was there when it was constructed. It was a nice addition to the neighborhood. It fits in and well-maintained, well taken care of, and to see it rebuilt there would be wonderful. So I just wanted to tell you how nicely they take care of it, and it's an addition to our neighborhood, and I get to look at it every day. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone beyond 200 feet that wishes to speak?
Hi, Bruce Britton, I'm the zoning officer here. I just wanted to clear up a couple things. So, yep,
Ms. Britton, do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
yes. Okay, so Craig pretty much hit it on the head. The code allows the addition to be done. The non-conforming house that existed, just because it was non-conforming doesn't mean we can't add on to it. The addition has to meet all the area and bulk requirements, the setbacks and everything. I believe the initial application that came in, I think it was the beginning of March, actually got kicked back. I kicked it back, denied it, because there were some elements that were in the setback. They were kind of matching the 5 foot on the one side. So it got revised and everything, and it might have even been once or twice it got revised, but eventually everything met. So that's why the zoning permit was issued based on our codes. So other than that, if you guys have any questions you would like me to clear up, anything? All right.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yes.
Thank you. I just want to thank the members of the board for your time and attention with this application tonight. I know it was a little longer than anticipated, but I think it's important that we get all the numbers correct and everything's laid out. So tonight you've heard testimony from the property owner, Mr. Grace, our contractor, Lance Bowman, and our 2 experts, Terry Thomas and Paul Cates. You've heard testimony regarding the variances sought. The existing conditions on this lot create a clear hardship. The existing lot is non-conforming with respect to both lot area, width, and frontage, and due to the rear of the property being about 2/3 water, the upland buildable area of the lot is smaller than a typical lot in the R3 district, which really inhibits the extent to which this lot can be used. Mr. Thomas also testified as to the purposes of zoning that will be advanced by this application, as well as the negative criteria. He provided testimony that this would be, a visual improvement, as well as it would assist with preserving the building from flood with this new concrete block foundation. And the negative criteria, as you can see from the 2 exhibits that we submitted tonight, we have exhibits A2 and A3. This building, what is proposed, is not only consistent with what was there before and existed for 23 years, but also consistent with the remainder of the homes in the neighborhood. The properties next door to them all have setbacks that are consistent with what is proposed and what was existing, and the height as well. So most importantly, as Mr. Bowman explained, it was never the intent of the applicant to fully demolish the structure. They intended to proceed with the zoning permit as it was previously issued. However, once we got to a point where it was unavoidable, they needed to rebuild the foundation, which is what triggered the variance, and that's why we're here today. The proposed conditions are almost identical to what was previously approved, with those few minor changes, which are actually positive impacts under the zoning and construction permits issued. So I just want to thank everybody again for their time tonight.
Thank you. Ready for you.
There doesn't seem to be much disagreement on the law. Once you demolish a non-conforming structure, you kind of start from scratch, and you have to comply with the ordinance. You have to show why what you're building is a better zoning alternative than a compliant structure. They've discussed the challenges of this lot. It's one of those lots, kind of like on yacht, where a lot of the lot is on water, so you end up having to try to squeeze a decent house in on a small bit of upland. And I think that's their primary thrust of their argument, is that it'd be nice to comply with the side yards and all, but it's not that big of a lot. You'd have a tall, skinny house and not a lot of living space on a really big lot. Just happens to be smaller because the water's there. So I think that's the gist of their argument. So they phrase it as a hardship argument, and that's probably the correct analysis, is a C1 analysis. I suppose you could do a C2 as well. You've heard the testimony. You'll weigh both of those standards in applying it. I always tell everyone, we're not a board of equity, right? We're not punishing people for doing it the wrong way or giving them a break because they did it the wrong way, right? So this is one of those ones where it's running the other way. Usually I'm telling you, don't punish them because they built it already. Just pretend it's not there and do a zoning analysis. Well, in this one, I have to say, you probably shouldn't give them a break because there's a foundation there. Okay, we wouldn't punish them for that. We were going to help them for that. But I do think they get some credit for the fact that it has existed in that condition for a long time without incident. Okay, so the reason non-conforming structures, when you're expanding a non-conforming structure and you get a lower standard, is because it has shown that it can handle that condition. It's been there for 23 years, and there hasn't been a disaster. So that gives you some idea that maybe this setback isn't horrible, okay? None of the neighbors came out and said, finally, they got rid of this setback. Thank goodness, make it go back to where it was. So you're getting some indication that it's able to exist, and the site can accommodate this size setback. So I do think it's relevant that it was there before for that reason. Doesn't mean they get it, do them a favor, but it stays out. So those are the thoughts. You apply your C1, C2 standards, avoid comments about punishing them for knocking it down, and make your decision on that. Okay, does anybody have any questions for me? Unless someone is adamant, we'll vote on the C1 and C2 standards together. So I want you to apply both of those standards in your mind and decide if they meet them. If they meet one of them, then approve it. If they don't meet either, then reject it, okay? So the motion I recommend being made is a motion to grant the application as presented with variances 1 through 5 on page 3, with the table amended to be 104.25 on rear yard, 0.388 on floor area with 4 bedrooms, and the conditions 1 through 16 with the attempting to comply with the shade tree ordinance, but if not possible, then to comply with the code requirements for replacing trees. And there were 2 waivers, number 16 and 27 on page 2. So that's the motion I recommend being made, but how you vote is up to you.
Okay, would somebody like to make that motion?
Make the motion.
Okay, motion by Mr. Bodnar.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Walsh.
Mr. Ledwin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
No.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Bodnar?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
thank you. And we're going to take a 5-minute break before our next application.
Microphones off, please.
Secret one? Secret one?
next application is Cape Home Investments, 401 Pittsburgh Avenue.
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. John Amenhauser, the DeWeese Law Firm, here this evening on behalf of the applicant Cape Home Investment 2 LLC. As indicated, this is an application for variance relief at 401 Pittsburgh Avenue. It's identified on the city's tax map as Block 1165, Lot 4.02. Through this application, what the applicant is seeking is to construct a 15 by 28-foot swimming pool in the rear of the property at 401 Pittsburgh Avenue. Swimming pools, as you know, are permitted accessory use in the R3 zoning district, but the reason that we're back before you this evening is based on the fact that this property received variance relief through a prior application in January of this year for the construction of the principal single-family dwelling that now exists on the site. So given that we needed variance relief for that building, any addition to the property required us to come back here based on city ordinance. In addition to that, there was also an additional variance that was highlighted and noted in Mr. Hurlis's report for which we're seeking relief, and that's under Section 62A1B of the city zoning ordinance, and it relates to this swimming pool being connected to an existing patio on the ground level of the property that runs the width of the rear of the dwelling and is within the front yard setback along Idaho Avenue. That'll be testified to in more detail by Mr. Murphy this evening. To that end, here with me tonight is Brian Murphy. Brian is a professional engineer and professional planner, principal with the firm of MV Engineering in Cape May Courthouse. Brian was with me at the prior application for this property in January. I know you've been before this board on other occasions in the past as well, correct?
Correct.
With that, Madam Chair, we would be accepting of him as a professional, as both an engineer and a planner. And additionally, I have Marcelo Mogavero with me tonight. Marcelo is a member with the applicant entity, Cape Home Investment 2 LLC. I don't intend to elicit any testimony from Mr. Mogavero, but he's here should questions arise from any board members or if we need any assistance working anything out. So if I can have them both sworn. Sure.
Provisionally. Each of you swear or affirm to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
So Brian, as I just mentioned in opening remarks, we were previously before this board in January of this year related to this property. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Since the date of our last approval, the applicant has created plans to construct an in-ground swimming pool in the rear of the property. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, in order to do so, we needed to file this application, and we have two variances that we're seeking tonight based on our application and Mr. Hurlis's review. Would you agree with that?
I agree.
Okay. Now, the first variance, as I mentioned, is under Section 73D of the zoning ordinance, and essentially what it amounts to is we're required to come back here even if what we're proposing to do as the newest addition is fully compliant, because of the fact that the prior application was, it was necessary to obtain variance relief from the prior application. Is that right?
That's my understanding, correct.
Okay. And the second variance that we're seeking is related to the pool being connected to the ground level patio, which, as I mentioned, runs the width of the rear of the house and encroaches into the front yard setback. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, in regard to those two variances, Brian, is it your professional opinion that relief could be granted under either the C1 or the C2 criteria?
I agree, correct.
And which of those two do you believe are appropriate here?
I believe the C1 variance is reasonable. That's the hardship variance. We have a copy of the plan behind me, and I highlighted the pool in blue. Part of the pool is, by definition, is the deck. As Mr. Amenhauser just stated, we were here before, or in January this year, for the dwelling, for the parking. And it's at the intersection of Pittsburgh and Idaho. As we all know, Idaho really, it stops half the way before it even reaches the end of the property. By definition, it is a corner lot. This pool has to be set back the distance. If you've been by there, you see the building's under construction. It's just about completed. If you look at it, it looks like it is completed. The deck is already there. But because we're adding a pool, and this deck is connected to the pool, by definition, it requires a variance. And other than the fact that we're here because we got a variance earlier, that's the only variance, and it's really a technical variance. The deck is already there. It was there as part of the application. It was reviewed by this board. It was approved. We would have liked to have placed the pool in the middle of the lot, but to make it conforming by setbacks, we did move it, so it's a little bit offset, and you can see that it's very reasonable out there, and I believe that it's reasonable to grant the C1 variance because of the hardship that that deck currently exists. If it was not for the pool, it would be what was approved by this board just a few months ago.
So Brian, in terms of the pool itself, we're compliant with all required setbacks, correct?
That is correct, with the exception of the deck that I just discussed.
Now, and you also indicated this lot fronts on two different streets.
It does. It fronts on Pittsburgh Avenue, which is the main street that runs to the ocean. We all know that. And then Idaho Avenue, which is only partially improved, and it goes to the wetlands open space behind it.
So while we technically have two front yards, this building fronts onto Pittsburgh, so we've treated Idaho, although it's a front, as more of a traditional side yard, correct?
That is correct.
Now, the side yard setback requirements in the zoning district are 8 feet, is that right?
I believe so, yes. Side yard setback are 8 feet, that's correct.
And we do have 8 feet between the edge of the patio and the rear, or in the property line along Idaho Avenue, is that right?
Oh, yeah, very much so. Mhm.
So we'd be compliant
Yeah,
if this
8
were
feet.
an interior lot, but
Oh.
based on the fact that it's on a corner is what's triggering the need for this relief, right?
Absolutely correct.
So Brian, you've given testimony as to how you believe the C1 criteria is applicable. Do you also believe that variance relief could be granted under the C2 criteria?
I believe the C2, if you didn't recognize the C1 variance, it could be granted under the C2, and that's where the benefits outweigh the detriments. And we believe that the benefits of allowing the pool to be constructed with the variance for the deck, that's really where the variance comes in, could be granted for, I believe there's 3 special reasons that would apply to this. And by letters, I would say G, I, and M. G, which is an appropriate location for a variety of things, and I believe this is an appropriate location for the pool. I is to promote a desirable visual environment. With the pool, there's a landscaping requirement that's required, so there's additional landscaping. We believe the pool is an attractive feature to go with this house. It's consistent with other homes in its immediate neighborhood. And M, which is the efficient use of land, and we believe creating this pool at this location is efficient, and because the variance that's being requested tonight is just that of a technical nature in my mind, because the deck is already there and was previously granted, that it can be granted, and this pool can go in very efficiently.
Can I pause you right there for a second? I think I may have missed a variance in your review. The covered patio with the permeable pavers that's attached to here, that covered patio, is that part of the roof structure from the principal structure?
You're asking if it's under the roof, or?
Yeah, is it under the roof?
The ground floor.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's on the ground.
So there's another requirement that says you have to be 10-foot setback from the principal structure, and that's for safety reasons. So I think you're not meeting that 10-foot setback from the principal structure. So if you could, I think that variance needs to be requested, and I would just ask you to testify with regards to safety and what the board has typically heard in justification of that is whether a ladder can be put up to the rear of the structure to access the upper floors. I don't have the architectural plans here, so I can't.
Yeah.
But I think,
From the main structure.
yeah, you have to be 10, so you're.
So I think there's a fairly simple way to get rid of a couple variances, if the board's accepting. And I've already talked to my client about this. We looked at this while sitting, waiting in the last application. We can move we would agree to, move this edge of the pool back to 10 feet.
Okay.
By doing so, we'd be compliant with that zoning ordinance requirement. We'd also disconnect the patio and the pool. So I believe it would get rid of both of those
All right,
variances
so-
in doing so.
We talked about this in a past application. Just because you physically disconnect by a
Correct.
foot or two, doesn't disconnect that patio from really the pool use.
10 feet is, I mean, I think it seems smooth.
So, I mean, that's, so, I just wanted, the board should discuss that.
Yeah, and that's-
It's very different than the last one.
It is, and that's, right, the ordinance, as I read it, indicates that, right, the word connected is used, and we did, that was a planning board discussion, I'm recalling it vividly. But the question was, and at the time in a different application, we had a strip of grass between the pavers and the pool, and at the time, it was the planning board's opinion that they're connected. Regardless of whether that strip of grass is there, they're connected. So I guess the question becomes, if that's connected, what is the width and the distance between the pavers and the pool that would satisfy the board to say they're no longer connected? I guess if we know what that is, we can then make a decision, okay, well, we know what the dimensions of the pool would be in order to appease that ordinance requirement.
I don't think I could defend an appeal when something is 10 foot away from the deck that existed independently of the pool, and now it's 10 feet from it that's connected to the pool. I'm
It's
sorry,
10 feet from the main dwelling.
Right.
It'll only be a foot.
From the
deck,
patio
from the
edge.
patio.
Okay, why isn't the patio part of the main dwelling? Maybe that's where I'm a little confused. Isn't there a roof over it and stuff?
There's a deck.
There's a
Good.
deck. There's a deck above it.
But is it covered, isn't there something that says covered on it?
It says covered patio, but I don't have the architectural plan, so they're telling us it's a covered deck.
Yeah, if we were to remove the pavers, you would see it would just be 6-by-6 posts with a deck above. We put the pavers in, it just gives a base to, it's not screened in, there's no walls.
No, it's just a width.
Right, so the bottom of the deck above is what is
It's the
over
bottom
top.
of the deck above.
Yeah, okay, I thought you were having kind of 10 feet away from the deck. Okay, we got 1 foot away.
Right, so-
Yeah, that's a little less.
Yeah, and I guess we're just looking for direction in that sense.
I don't vote. So
No, and that's more of a question for the board,
this is
because
it's hard. Do you have a picture of the rear of the structure? Here's the problem, here's the difficulty, okay? I'm not sure the board, I can't speak for the board, but having this pool connected to this existing porch that just happens to be a porch that's 8 feet from the side yard, that sounds more like happenstance than a zoning problem to me, but I don't know. The bigger problem at the moment is having the pool against that patio with a roof that's connected to the principal structure is less than 10 feet from the
Correct.
principal structure. And then we get into this whole fire safety issue.
Yep.
And the fact that it's a flat patio with the pool, so the idea of having to go around the pool is not a problem, like that's not it's just this fire issue. And is that roof the same?
So-
Like, can you put the ladder next to the pool and go up on the roof, and you're in the same position on the roof as you would be if
Yeah, we provided photographs with the application packet, so they are, there's numerous photographs as exhibits.
focus the board on that, and let's have your engineer talk about whether he believes that this location of this pool inhibits the ability to get a ladder to the principal structure. Right?
Yeah.
That's what we.
So if you look at the third photograph provided, I think that's a sign.
Sure. I would first want to qualify that I am not a fireman. So it's reasonable to assume the firefighter would come to the rear of the property. As I stated, the pool is offset. It's only 15 feet wide. So the firefighters would have well over half of the building to place a ladder to get up onto any roof that would be above. There's also room on the side to put a ladder on the side to get up if they needed to get on the side of the property. So I believe having, which would be 17 feet from the edge of the pool to the edge of the building, place to put a ladder, that should be sufficient enough room to be able to place a ladder safely to fight any fire that would be within this dwelling.
If they had to get into a window over to the left-hand side of the structure.
Well, then they would climb up on the roof and then get in that way. Because once you're on the deck, then they have to, they would have the ability to walk along the deck or to walk along the roof once they're up on the roof. So they can get up on the roof over here on the east side and walk over to the west side if they had access to a window from there.
Unless it was engulfed in flames.
Then they saved the foundation.
Is that a patio that was the whole width of the house?
Correct.
The second floor?
Yes.
So once you're up there, you're going
You can move laterally.
where you want?
Yes, and there's two forms of egress on that floor for that porch. There's a door in the master bedroom, and there's also a door in the kitchen, which both exit onto that rear porch.
But I guess all of that noted, I guess I'm still curious as to what distance between the patio and the pool would disconnect them, in the board's opinion, because I don't think your zoning ordinance provides anything. It just says connected. And we'd like to know,
I mean, if you're asking me, I can tell you this. I don't view the connection to that patio as being significant
understood.
for the issues why we care about it's connected. The idea of connecting the pool and the patio, my board engineer will correct me if I'm wrong, because he knows a lot more about this stuff than I do.
Okay.
But the idea of being concerned about the pool being connected to a walkway around it has to do with setbacks, that it allows the activity of the pool to get too close to a side yard for noise of the people next door.
Noise, activity, and
The patio
commotion.
you're talking about is going towards your own home.
Correct.
So to me, the connection to that patio is not what that ordinance is directed to. Craig, am I saying that right? Does that make sense?
You're saying it right. So I believe the intent is, the reason why we connect the patios is because the commotion, the noise, the activities that impact the neighbors. So technically, I think you're triggering that variance because that's the only patio that's out there, correct?
On the
Right?
ground level, that's the only
At the rear yard. So people utilizing that pool that are hanging out there are going to be on that patio. I think it's connected. Just based on that, if there was multiple patios and, and that was just attached to the house, and you could probably make the argument that, well, people enjoying the pool are going to be on this patio, noise, commotion is going to be over there, this one's not going to be, that's how I would look at it.
But I thought they were concerned about patios connected to the side yard.
Well, no, this is a front yard. So.
This is technically it.
But, I mean, there is justification for this, like, I raised it, and I'm sorry to throw you the curveball, but I just saw it.
Well, it allowed us to bring up the
Yeah,
question,
so-
which honestly,
but I
I'm
mean-
curious about for purposes beyond this application even. I'd
But I
like to
mean,
know what
the
that
treatment, Idaho Avenue is really going to be a dead-end street. And
Yes.
we didn't really talk about this. The environmental constraints that are on the properties behind that are really not going to allow that road to ever be pushed through. I'll be surprised if it ever happens.
There's no lot. Didn't they get sold?
Yeah,
So
I think the DEP
I think
controls
they're gonna
it right now.
abandon the street as
Yeah,
well.
I didn't do the study on like lot ownership, but I believe the DEP controls that property in the back.
Correct.
So it really functions as a side yard.
Right.
That really can only impact someone across the street from you on Idaho Avenue. So I think there's justification for doing it, but I think technically we're ticking off that it does create a variance, and we have to address it.
And from, going back to the fire, we do have a letter from the fire department stating that they've approved, have reviewed and recommend approval.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there another house to the left?
There is.
Yes.
And how close will the pool be to that property?
It's 10 feet from.
Yeah.
It's 10 feet from the decking of the pool to the side yard.
And then they have a pool as well, so they're probably equidistant from whatever the setbacks are required from their fence to their pool.
So if they meet the requirement of at least 8 feet, you're talking about 18 feet between.
I also made a recommendation, so there are newer pool regulations that have been on the books for over a year. The new requirements for pools are to buffer the side and rear lot lines with vegetation, and there's a planting requirement. They're meeting it for the side and rear. But we're really treating Idaho as like a side yard, and that buffering, I recommended be extended along that line to further buffer that front yard where the impact is. Is the applicant willing to do that?
Sure, and just make sure that, so what you're stating, Mr. Hurlis, is to extend this landscape buffer
Right, exactly.
where my finger is showing along Idaho. Sure, and I will say, on our plan, you can see where Idaho is improved, and what we're going to do is bring that buffer down to the area that almost matches the unimproved portion of Idaho Avenue.
So there's another benefit that they're going to buffer that front yard. It's really a front yard, but we're kind of treating it like a side for this discussion. But
Excuse me, Mr. Ellis, just for clarification, when you say that, would you mean it's required to have a fence, obviously, so what would it be on the outside of the fence?
it would be on the inside.
Inside of the fence, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can do it either or.
Okay, I just didn't know what the board would prefer, okay.
I'll look to the board, just say whether they want it outside or inside, but,
So Brian, just to finalize your analysis under the C2 criteria, you went over the positives that you believe would be advanced or promoted if this were to be approved. Do you see any detrimental impact to the public good of the zone plan if the board were to approve the relief we're requesting?
I don't. As this discussion has been going on for over the last however many minutes, it looks, acts, and it appears like a side yard setback. So with that in mind, and with the positive statements that I made earlier, I believe that this can be approved without any detriment to the zone plan and zoning ordinance of the city of Cape May.
There's been no mention to the lot coverage, applying for lot coverage.
So we should,
No.
yeah.
I will,
Am I jumping the gun?
I'll explain that.
Okay.
Yeah, when I go through my review memo, I'll clear that up.
Is your client the same person that was here in January?
Yes, ma'am.
You're the same owner then, and you own both lots
Yes, ma'am,
and develop both lots?
Yes, ma'am.
And one has a pool and one does not?
correct.
Why did you not?
It was a
present-
function of when we got our approval for the DEP and trying to get the pilings in before the deadline for Memorial Day. We didn't have time to get it on the original to do, but I needed to get the pilings in before Memorial Day. So the plot plan wasn't developed with a
So
pool.
your intention was always to add a pool?
I would have always liked to have done one, we just couldn't get it done. It was more of a timing necessity.
I don't have anything further at this time. I'd like to address any comments that may be raised, but nothing further in our presentation.
Okay. Anyone else on the board have any comments, questions? Great.
Okay, summarizing my September 29th, 2024 review. This is a project at 401 Pittsburgh Avenue located in the R3 Medium Density Residential District. You've heard testimony that this is an application that's been here before you before. It was approved as part of Resolution 222, 2024, semicolon 3. That was for the dwelling. You're now dealing with the pool, a proposed pool, and the variances that are necessitated by that proposal. On page 2 of 6, the second paragraph from the top, it indicates at the bottom that there's a lot coverage variance that's requested. That was indicated on their plans that it was non-conforming, but this is in the R3 district. The plans incorrectly state that the maximum coverage permitted is 40%. It's actually 45%, and they're proposing 40.7, which complies. So strike that last sentence, a lot coverage variance is requested. That is incorrect. It's not necessary. Completeness review. There was one waiver from the checklist requirements for the C variances. The survey that was provided was not sealed. They requested a waiver from that. This is the same exact survey that we used on the previous application. I think it's fine. I did support the waiver and recommended deeming this application complete. On page 3, I highlight the variances. The first set of variances are, I just refreshed the board's memory, and for new board members that weren't here, there were 2 variances that were granted, the building setback, and that related to Idaho Avenue, and the parking in the site triangle. Both of those were approved. They're now, so the first item under the new variances says 52573D, zoning review. I don't know that that's a variance, but that's the mechanism that's requiring them to come here and get the variance. Even if they didn't need any variances, they would still have to come to you and get approval. Okay? So the item number 2 is the pool patio and the front yard setback, and that's the attached patio because the setback requires 10-foot setback or a 25-foot front yard setback to any pool or patio connected. They have a setback of 8 foot proposed to the nearest face of that patio as measured from Idaho Avenue, so there's a variance necessary from that. The other one that I kind of hit them with tonight was the setback from the principal structure. Once I realized that structure overhangs that patio, we don't have the 10-foot that's required, 10-foot setback from the principal structure to the pool. So I believe that distance is 0, but they have provided testimony indicating they can get a ladder up to the deck and move laterally and access the upper story. Okay, so those are the 2 variances. On page 5 of 6, my general review comments should be conditions of approval, and the first one kind of is all-encompassing, and it says all of the conditions set forth in Resolution 222-2024:3 should be conditions unless otherwise modified by this approval.
Mr. Hurlis, if I can on that, one condition that was in the memorializing resolution, it's on page 4, and it's in regard to installation of sidewalk along the sides of the property.
Okay.
So if this were to be approved tonight, one thing that we would ask, if it's acceptable to the board, is the sidewalk to be installed along Idaho Avenue be allowed to occur after installation of the pool as opposed to before. One thing we do, the house is pretty much done. It's the intention of my client to obtain a CO for the property. So what we don't want to do is put a sidewalk in as a condition of that prior resolution and then be driving over it and otherwise possibly damage it if we're to be putting a pool in. So if we could have that added to this.
These will be 2 separate COs.
Understood.
Okay.
But the concern is, are we going to, if we don't meet all the requirements of the prior resolution?
No, I'm not going to, I'm the one that inspects.
Okay.
I will not make you put the sidewalk in and then drive equipment over and break it.
Thank you. I just wanted to clear it up. That's all.
I'm kind of practical that way.
It was in the resolution. I'm just clear.
Okay. Okay, so item number 2, we've asked the zoning table should be revised, and Mr. Murphy, just revise your table so that they indicate that 45% maximum coverage. That'll get rid of that discrepancy. Item 3, I asked them to revise their landscape schedule. There is a landscaping schedule in the ordinance that has minimum size requirements for the plantings. They have to meet those, so therefore that needs to be addressed on the plans. And then 4, I already talked about, and they've agreed to, is they will extend that landscaping buffer along the frontage of Idaho Avenue in the rear yard portion of that, where the pool is. Item number 5 is just our review of the drainage improvements. They have provided an updated design based on the pool and coverage. That design is acceptable. Item number 6, they have to comply with the minimum stormwater management and grading requirements during and after construction. 7, their pool safety fencing is required in accordance with Section 525-61A3. They've proposed a 4-foot-high vinyl fence. 8 is addressing the lighting. They propose 1 pool light within the pool. That's within this, at the bottom of the pool, right, on the side wall of the pool. Okay. So there's no overhead lighting for the pool. 9 is our sidewalk condition that I just talked about. 10 is our standard condition for the inspection escrow and the certificate of occupancy inspection. 11 is comply with the requirements of the Shade Tree Commission, Fire Department, and Public Works Department. We received memos from Shade Tree with comments. They recommended approval So long as you preserve, a large existing tree to the right of the proposed pool must be protected during construction, and they recommend the approval, the protection type. You have any issue with?
That's already in place.
Okay, so long as that's been preserved. Fire Department recommended approval dated 10/17/24, no comments. Public Works recommended approval dated 10/15/24, and they recommended with the following condition: it's approved if the county approves your curve cut. The applicant has provided me with a copy of the curb cut approval from the county, so I know that that's been addressed. So I don't think there's any issues with regards to those. Okay, 12, standard compliance with all other state, county, and local approvals. 13 is just informational. It is not located in the historic district, so there's no approval there necessary. 14 is our standard condition that they have to comply with any and all applicable affordable housing requirements. And finally, item 15, should the board grant approval, they're required to revise the plans to address all conditions that the board sets. Any questions?
One, just speaking with my client, given the discussion I know that we've had, I think it's practical, my client thinks it's practical, to just eliminate the need for those two variances that we talked about, and I think by doing so, I know we talked about it earlier, but what he's agreed to do, that pool right now is proposed is 28 feet long from front to back and 15 feet wide. In order to ensure that it's 10 feet from the property, or from the dwelling, he's willing to take that 10-foot back. It'll shrink it to an 18-foot long by 15-foot wide pool, and it would otherwise then be 10 foot and would no longer be connected to the patio pavers as well. I think by doing so, we eliminate those two, and he's willing to do it as a condition of approval.
I would agree the variances are eliminated.
That would still require us to come here based on section 73D,
Yeah.
but I just think it makes sense and makes this.
One more time with that, sorry. Making the pool smaller.
Smaller, and moving it away from the dwelling,
House.
so that you'll have that 10 feet between it and the house.
And the pavers.
Yes, the pavers and the
And
center.
the pavers aren't connected.
Will be moved 10 feet from the overhead.
It's not going to be moved, it's going to be.
Shrunk.
Size is going to be smaller.
Yes, you're right, it's not getting
You're
rid.
pushing it, right,
No, we're taking away 10 feet on the front.
right. You're cutting 10 feet off the front of the pool.
Yes.
We always like to see you more compliant than less compliant, so. So I think you just have to endorse this new proposal under section 52573D.
Yeah.
Right?
The amendment to the original.
Right.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, there's no variance. There's nothing to approve.
Yeah.
Right?
This time, we're open to the public within 200 feet. With beyond 200 feet. Closed to the public.
Okay, the motion that I recommend being made is a motion to grant the application to allow a pool that conforms with the zoning ordinance, despite the property having previously obtained no setback, subject to the conditions and waivers that remain applicable given the alteration of the project.
Okay, anyone?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Setzer and seconded by Mrs. Notch.
Thank you. Mr. Ledwin?
No.
Mrs. Notch?
No.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Bodnar?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nice night. Thank you.
Something I'd like to say, just among the board members, there's a concern that no one ever really talks about is pool safety. When there's a deck up against the pool like that, people will jump off the deck into the pools. I know that there's hotels in town that actually put their pool furniture in the pool at night to keep people from jumping off balconies and stuff. And there's a, just from my own, there's a house down the street, people are in there all the time. There's a deck right there, second floor, and they're jumping off into the pool. It's a matter of time where someone's going to wind up getting hurt.
I mentioned that here.
Did you?
Yeah,
Did you?
that one.
I think that should be as much of a
Maryland
concern
Avenue.
as fire.
Because, I mean, one of my best friends down, a kid broke his neck just jumping into a pool. Just his feet hit and broke his neck.
Left the bills?
Right. Before we close, we need to do the payment of bills. Need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Motion by Mr. Venuto, seconded by Mrs. Notch.
Thank you. Mr. Levin?
Yes.
Mrs. Notch?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Zexer?
Yes.
Mr. Bodnar?
Yes.
Mr. Venuto?
Yes.
Mrs. Werner?
Yes.
Thank you.
And motion to adjourn, aye.
Hey.
Yes.
Yes.
All in favor, everyone? All right, thank you and good night.